Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Telecast-tv. I'm Miracle Ngala. You're watching a conversation with former Inec chief, Mr. Mike Igini, speaking about the electoral law and what has been put in place on how to have electronic transmission in real time. He exposed many dirty secrets which the Inec is busy romancing with the present day government. He said Inec has the authority to carry out election without any form of manipulation from the executive arm of the government, the legislative arm, or the judiciary. Share your thought about this. Comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Watch this video to end. Don't miss trending videos.
Of the expression of the will of the people in a democracy, as exemplified by processes, procedures that we started developing since 2010 under the Jega leadership down to the period of the last chairman, all aimed at taking our electoral process from the poetry and rubric of pain and frustration. Here we are again, several years after. We are still debating what had been long supposed to have been settled. And that's basically, for the past 2 years, I have told folks that I have decided to say good night to Nigeria. Because after 30 years of the struggle for a better Nigeria, particularly having to be in the commission for 10 years, I consider all those 10 years with what is going on as a waste of my precious life. But I decided, based on so many causes across the country, and particularly the fact that when I recall Pythagoras, when he was fed up, as I've been for a while now, with his people of his own time, Pythagoras went into isolation. But subsequently, at some point, realized that the best way to study human beings is to come back and live with them. It's on that basis that the current debate that's ongoing, that your humble self and so many media stations have been calling to hear my opinion, that I decided to offer that today. That's point number one. Number two, it should be noted that the greatest promise of democracy, why it is embraced, it is essentially because it brings about participation and accountability in the process of human development. Shown as at 2012, we came to the commission in 2010. The commission has carried out innovations, realizing the fact that any institution of society that fails to embrace innovation will suffer decay and chaos. On the issue of transmission of results, let me state this emphatically, that in 2021, the Independent National Electoral Commission, where I served for 10 years, that I consider as wasted years of my own legal practice, the commission issued a comprehensive statement, just as what is going on today, this debate. Inec is absent in this debate. Inec is isolated. It is Inec that conducts election. Whether there is capacity, whether Inec is ready, whether there are infrastructure to support e-transmission, the commission is expected to speak. And indeed, Inec has spoken before. This is not a first
documents that should be released. Inec was clear, very unequivocal, that with respect to e-transmission, the commission was ready, entrusting the public their public support, and point three, that indeed the technology
as well as the infrastructure required to do this was available. That was a public statement before the enactment of the 2022 Act. Regrettably, as I've told Nigerians before, that what appears to be the greatest link, the weakest link in the line of the defense of democracy and the rule of law is my constituency, the judiciary. You refer to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, the problem we're having today is brought about by the first court. How? Since 1979 up to 2015, or 2007 precisely, and 2011, the apex court had always made the point clear, and you check all Inec documents, you will find that every document to be released for public, it will state that elections are guided by three principal laws: the Constitution, the Electoral Act, and indeed regulations and guidelines issued by Inec. These are the three governing laws. All these laws, they have the force of law that must be implemented fully, fairly, and impartially. With respect to the judgment of the Supreme Court, it's shocking that after all the historical judgment by the apex court, that because regulations and guidelines issued by Inec, they are made pursuant to the Constitution and indeed the Electoral Act, they have the force of law. They are subsidiary legislation. Because if you go to the first alteration of the Constitution that was brought about by the Jonathan regime, who, when he came to office, because of his votary for credible election, when his attention was drawn to Section 160, as it was then, with respect to executive bodies set up under Section 153 of the Constitution, he subjected Inec to the direction and control of the president at the federal level and at the state level with respect to SIEC. When that was brought to Jonathan's attention, they wanted freedom for the umpire. That led to the first alteration. And in that alteration, Nigerians should go and read it. He stated clearly that of all the executive bodies set up with respect to the Independent National Electoral Commission, its powers to make its own rules and regulate its own procedure shall not be subject to any authority, including the president. It's written there in the Constitution. Furthermore, Section 148 of even the 2022 Electoral Act is unequivocal to the effect that the Inec, the Commission, shall have the power to issue regulation and guidelines to give effect to every provision of the Electoral Act which has to do with elections. This background knowledge is important to see the tragedy of the decision of the Supreme Court that has thrown everything in disarray, and that today we are arguing, debating what has belonged with settled. So, it is that decision that has informed the idea by members of the National Assembly when they work together, In fact, I was so impressed, ab initio, that there was no partisan attitude in the effort in the current act. But shockingly, as we are getting to the end, there is now a deviation. Because they now wanted to ensure that the innovations that have been developed to address historical challenges of election service delivery in the country should now be reflected in the Electoral Act.
Let me butt in quickly, Mr. Guinea. I like to take up a few questions.
To land on that point, just to land on that point. It is that effort that has now led to the current debate that is going on with respect to the proviso that have been put in there, which is a replica of incident form, a reintroduction of incident form, and it's a recipe for chaos. And as we go on this program, I am going to give you details of how that is going to cause problem in the coming election, because there will be no network, since there is now a law to the effect that where there is no network, that is the point that needs to be noted.
And that is the point where I'm going to start my question. So for a lot of us who remember the card reader machine and how the law at the time gave the power, discretionary power, to Inec official on the field to say, should the card reader fail, you can revert to the incident form. And some people, like you mentioned, just went straight to the incident form and started filling it and padding it as it were at a time. But we've graduated, we've moved forward. But those will be asking that, because, and Senator Bayemi Bamdele has given, from his position as a majority leader, giving an analysis of our infrastructural problem, of how we have advanced technologically, and said, based on that, we need to give a corridor, a safe corridor, should technology fail, for us to give that discretion to say, if it fails, this will happen and that will happen. Do you agree with him?
I partly agree with him and partly disagree with him completely for the following reasons. The distinguished senator knows, as a lawyer, and we on his common knowledge, that discretionary powers are susceptible to abuse. And as I speak to Nigerians tonight, I speak as someone who had field experience, who collectively with my colleagues carried out pilots across the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I've sent you some data to show, and I'm going to give more information on this, that we first and foremost identify election rigging provision in our laws. It took us 20 years for the National Assembly to accept to repeal those laws. Section 49, Section 53, which is now 51 in the 2022 Act, Section 49 of the old 2010 Act, which is now 47, Section 68 of the old Act, which is now Section 65, these were profound election rigging provisions. Specifically, with respect to Section 49, it stated that was in fact the rigging provision that political elite sustained for 20 years, despite all our effort to appeal that it should be repealed. It simply stated that a voter who approaches a presiding officer where he registered, upon presentation of his voter's card, if the presiding officer is satisfied, that is language, he will issue him or her a ballot paper. Because of that, politicians started buying voters' cards. All you require to do, compromise the presiding officer. After all, what satisfies him? It could have been the money that they are giving to him that will satisfy him. There was no objective means to identify a voter, because the credibility of election in a democracy of one person, one vote, one person should not have multiple votes. It was when we came on board that we decided to sanitize. When we discovered that the legislator was reluctant to do so, because first, you must understand that if those who are going to be regulated by laws are the ones to make law, two things will happen. There will be statute capture and there will be statute sabotage. And I will give you details of statute sabotage. But with respect to this, it was against that background that we now, under the Jega leadership, we now introduce, first, recall that in 2011, we had to do separate accreditation, separate voting to deal with that section 49 that was the rigging, so that we could know who actually are the voters. That was in 2011. Now, because we came in a very short period, by 2015, we now decided to have the innovation of the card reader. The card reader business was to identify, because we have now succeeded for the first time. You know, we can easily forget this in this country, that before we came on board, every election cycle, Nigerians are meant to come and register. 18 years old people who are registered, you must need to register. But we succeeded in the 4 tracks of the EBS system, we did what we call the biometric registration of Nigerians successfully. With the biometric registration of Nigerians, we now introduce what we call the card reader as an identifier to identify, confirm, and authenticate. Now, when we now realize that people were having fingerprint issue, we now decided that how could you see a Nigerian, a citizen, who has come before a presiding officer? You could see the name on the register of voter. But the only challenge was that we are not able to confirm. Of course, on the card reader, you could see his picture, but you cannot confirm his biometric. We now decided that, look, you know what? There should be what we call a special form to show so that you can enter that special form, which is a discretion given to a presiding officer. Sheon, do you know what happened? In that card reader, we had an application because for inclusive electoral process, we took into account people who have lost their fingers, thumbprint. So there was an application in the card reader to take into account people like that. Do you know that in many places, the card reader was shut down? In most villages, they no longer have fingers anymore. A whole village, all fingers gone. They were now using that application, using incident form. That was what happened. Nigeria, have you forgotten the problem of incident form in Nigeria? By the time we were now going for the 2019 election, we now updated the software and the hardware of the card reader to get rid of incident form. That was what we did. Now, coming to the issue about transmission, which is now the discretion given to a presiding officer, let me give you a big background information to address the one aspect of the distinguished senator's statements about infrastructure. I hope that the commission will release its report of 2021. In that report, Sheon, it was clear that Nigeria was ready. In that, Inec and NCC, there was what a technical committee set up in preparation for e-transmission. In that committee that was set up, it was headed by one engineer, Obale Baska, including the National Commissioner, Mohamed Leki. They were the co-chairmen. Their report, they came out with an interesting report that with 2G and 3G, we had 93% coverage across the Federal Republic of Nigeria, polling units where we could transmit results. Please, Sheon, I have put excerpts of that report showing Zamfara, Borno State, all those places, showing that we could transmit and all that. Based on that, the commission came out with a report and allocated polling units to the mobile network of operators, the MNOs, Airtel, Nine Mobile, MTN, and Glo. There were 4. At the cost of 395,123,000 for the purpose of SIM cards, data bundle, configuration, and so on. The commission was ready. But what was the problem? Section 52 of the 2010 Electoral Act prohibited the use of any electronic process in our elections in Nigeria. They put that in there. When we came in 2012, we made submission to the National Assembly to get rid of that. They refused to do so. And that is why I've always made a point that any society that fails to embrace innovations will face chaos and decay. Now, they refused to do that. Because of that, Inec had to find a way around it with scattered innovation. As a matter of fact, let me inform here that with respect to e-transmission, it may interest Nigeria to know that when I was the commissioner in Cross River State, the first pioneer effort, pilot that was carried out, was led by Chidi Uwanfo, that cerebral engineer in Inec, with his team of brilliant Inec engineers in the office under Jega. They came to Cross River States when we conducted Governor Lie Imoke's second term election. I sat in my office where I'm seated here. There was a dashboard, not even I read, there was a dashboard put in place in the 18 local government of Cross River State. From the ward level, using laptops, working with the telcos. Results were coming in, it was amazing. I was seeing the result, everybody was seeing the result. That led to our initiation of the big hall that we built in the Inec office across river, so that could be going on.
Mr. Igini, just quickly, because of time.
We refer to infrastructure. So
yeah.
we refer to infrastructure.
Yeah.
For infrastructure, infrastructure is there 93 as of 2018. We are already ready for that. And Inec, in his concluding statement in that report, said that look, where we are ready. Left to us, our preference is for e-transmission. To put a proviso of this nature, having regard to our experience, that where there is no network, I bet you there will be no network in many places.
So, Mr. Igini,
chaos,
yeah.
Because I cannot be in a polling unit with a presiding officer. Nigeria cannot be a polling unit with a presiding officer where they can open their phone, they can see network, and the presiding officer says there's no network. That is going to be a problem. In any case, the beavers is configured both to operate online and offline. You must upload it. If there's no network within the immediate vicinity, then when you get to the next stage, it's going to hit the IREN. And the whole idea of the IREN, this is very important, is to underscore, which is what is contained in the guideline, that once you put all the dark alleys from ward level, local government, and all points of collations, those are dark alleys where changes normally take place. But once you transmit the result from the polling unit to the IREF, according to our regulations and guidelines, if the result presented at the ward level, at all the other level, is inconsistent with what is the IREF shall prevail, because the IREF result is the result and now that Nigerians have seen at the polling unit, which already viewed all over the world, so that nobody can change it. So the IREF must be given the legal status required, which is contained in our guidelines. But because Supreme Court has spoken, let us now have it real time. And by real time, what is meant is that when the election shall have been completed, the presiding officer has signed, the party agent have countersigned. Immediately after that, the presiding officer uses the papers. All you need to do, snap it and send it. You send it, it is both online and offline. So the argument of network is completely...
So, Mr. Igini, just quickly, sir, and I like this answer to be very brief. What is the implication of the amendment as is in the House of Reps version compared to the Senate version If we go ahead with that, what is the implication to the 2027 election, considering the Supreme Court judgment? Just briefly.
Well, if this proviso is retained, then there's going to be chaos in 2027 because there will be no network. Now, it is my plea to members of the National Assembly to be mindful of history because they are the greatest casualty as we have presented. Because who becomes a candidate in election is now determined by governors. Who will go to the House of Assembly, the House of Rep, Senate, they are determined by governor. Even though there are no such laws. Now, if you don't do that and you don't get a ticket, there's no multiple tickets for each seat of any house. If you don't have that grace of being given a ticket, you could go to another political party. And if you have a system that you put in place already, you can now, that will be a fallback position. And that is why you could see the rate of turnover with all the implications in terms of the money that has been spent for induction, training, and capacity building, all lost because of the fact that Nigeria, we are like a grasshopper. You know, grasshopper does not work on the long term. That's why grasshopper work in the rainy season, in the dry season, it's always working. That's why in Nigeria, good people who you have found in the National Assembly, who are brilliant, competent, who have demonstrated integrity, who have shown independence of thought to work for the country, they are never allowed to return back.
So, Mr. Igini, this is very important. Legally speaking,
the full implication.
Legally speaking, what will the record on the IREF do? Because there are those who will say the primary document as evidence for result at the polling unit is still the Form EC8A. What is the legal implication of the capturing of the IREF in the Electoral Act?
The implication is that once the result, you see, what we wanted to achieve, first and foremost, it should be noted that every reform proposal by the electoral management body or other stakeholder, they are intended to deal with a mischief that has been perpetrated by election riggers. It is the duty of the courts to advance the remedy that have been provided. With respect to this IREF, the idea is that once the results have been uploaded to the IREF, viewed by everybody, you can no longer change it. And that is why in the regulations and guidelines made personal to Section 160 as well as Section 148, we stated clearly there under paragraph 38 that when the result that have been presented by collation officer is inconsistent with what is on the IREF shall prevail, because the IREF has been seen by the empirical world. So, where we are, we appeal to members of the National Assembly, because they are also going to be the casualty of what I'm talking about. The result is going to come. You saw the table that we have presented. So, it is our best interest, because Supreme Court says so. But if Supreme Court has not taken that decision, we will not have a problem. Remember, the Supreme Court also said, in 2015, car reader is a beautiful device. Why is it not reflected in the Electoral Act? Today, where we now have the 2020 Electoral Act, do you know that contrary to our proposal, that you don't need to name a particular device, you now have a car reader mentioned in the 2020 Electoral Act instead of electronic device that Inec may decide to use. As we speak, the beavers is not in the 2022 Electoral Act. My final word is this, Cheun. Our democracy, whether it's going to have a hopeful future, will depend on the role of the judiciary. The trinity of the election management body, the judiciary, and key actors will depend whether the democracy will have a future. The rule of law is very important. It's a graceful ornament to a well-ordered and governed society. It is indeed the Corinthian capital of a polished society.
All right.
Without the rule of law, society is nothing but an aggregation of men and women of the most vicious who want to have their way. This is my message to the members of the National Assembly to do the needful for the good and sustenance of our democracy.
Mr. Mike Iginin, it's just a pleasure having you explain these issues and the implications to us because of your institutional knowledge and your profession as a lawyer. Thank you so much indeed. The nation appreciates, and we do appreciate. Thank you so much. Mr. Mike Iginin, a very senior lawyer, rights activist, and a former Inec resident electoral commissioner. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.